Welcome to Spider-Verse Minute, the tri-weekly podcast where we watch Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse 1 minute at a time. I'm Caroline Slater.
And I'm her brother, Sean.
This is Minute 2. It starts with the Columbia Pictures Presents and ends with some Spider-Man products being mentioned. For those keeping up, I have nicknamed this minute Peter Parker Intro, Part 1.
Yeah, I really like this minute. It's a really interesting way to introduce a character.
This has some of my favorite jokes in it and some of my favorite references in the whole movie in this minute. First off, I love how they acknowledge how many times Spider-Man has just been done, not just in the comics, specifically the Spider-Man origin, with the line, "Okay, let's do this one more time."
Yeah.
Which I think is just great. It's like, yes, we know it's been done 100,000 times in movies, in comics, and TV shows, and da-da-da-da-da. So I love that. I wrote specifically that I love the comic style credits.
Yeah, the way they come in, it's like, pow! Here's this, Columbia Pictures Presents, and then in association with Marvel.
It's also super satisfying to hear that first logo pop up with that music, which, okay, I have to say this too. This might be some of my favorite background music in any superhero movie. This whole sequence right here, I love this music.
Yeah, I agree. The soundtrack for this has been on par both with the I guess it's all original music, but with the original, just the score of the movie, as well as the lyrical music that was done with modern artists.
So many artists, and we'll talk a little bit about it in the next minute, but just to name a few, Nicki Minaj is in some, Jaden Smith, Post Malone, who else? A bunch of artists. Those were just the quick names that popped into my head. But they got some, they really... This whole soundtrack kind of always gives me a bit of a... This might be weird, a bit of a Star Wars feel. In the sense that it is so epic with its music.
Yeah, okay. I was going to say, I have no idea where you're going with this.
Yeah.
But I agree. It's got a very epic feel.
Even a lot of the more lyrical music still has a very epic feel to it, or very emotional feel. Very similar to how Star Wars in particular, but really John Williams in general with his compositions. Just, I love this music. Chris Pine voices the Spider-Man, correct?
Real quick. I just wanted to touch on the composers.
Oh, yes, please.
Daniel sorry. The composers third time's the charm. The composer's Daniel Pemberton. And he...
Small claps to him.
Yes.
Very quiet because I don't want to blow out the mic, but
I just want to touch on some of the other things that he's done the scores for before.
Please.
Just to touch on a couple that I'm familiar with and enjoyed. The Man from U.N.C.L.E. He did the.
I wanted to see that movie.
That's a really good movie.
Really? I need to watch it.
It's funny.
I want to watch it so bad. I'm upset I missed it in theaters.
Steve Jobs, which I haven't seen.
Is that the one with Ashton Kutcher?
It was the 2015 one.
I think that's the one with Ashton Kutcher.
No.
Or was it a documentary?
This was with Michael Fassbender.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think the Ashton Kutcher one was just Jobs. Or
Maybe.
like that.
Maybe.
See also.
2015.
Yeah, it's called Jobs, which was the one with Ashton Kutcher.
Yeah, and then there's Steve Jobs. You're right.
Yeah. The other movies he's filmed, I guess I could just... Yeah, the other movies he scored that I enjoyed was Ocean's 8. And then he did that one in 2018 along with this movie.
The man knows how to make a good score. This is a really to talk a little bit to go back with the score before I go back to the whole Chris Pine thing, what I particularly love about this is that it starts with a very brassy's not the right word, but a very almost like modern bah is the best way to describe the noise.
It's got like a bassy.
Very bassy, very not techno, but modified sound to it, which makes it very modern. But underneath it, throughout this whole montage sequence, you hear a lot of the classic superhero instruments, the trumpets, the violins, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, and it's mixed in with a very like R&B, rappy, like rap, the style of music done in those genres, which you know, heavily influences the music done in the movie.
Yeah, and it also just feels so appropriate too, since again the movie focuses on Miles, and that's the kind of music he listens to. Like that's sort of his stuff.
Yeah,
that's what and also he's from Brooklyn, and that's also the kind of music that surrounds Brooklyn. Having been there a few times, it is very much an R&B. That's also where a lot of R&B artists started, I believe. Or a lot of the iconic ones like Brooklyn, Bronx, all that area.
Yeah, New York is, you know, a big area for R&B and rap.
Yeah, so it makes total sense, and it just helps weave in all of the music from, again, like the score and the lyrics, because they all have that similar style. It's not like this sudden, this is classical superhero music, and then here's a pop song, which some movies very struggle with.
Yeah.
Specifically animated movies.
Yeah,
because you want those fun pop songs.
The pop music doesn't fit with the rest of the score, whereas this one, it flows almost seamlessly
beautifully
with it.
Sometimes I'm like, was this written by an artist? Is this supposed to have lyrics and then they just took it out, or what? And it's that's a sign of a great score and album in general.
Yeah. And I want to just touch on the logos real quick, and then we can get into
Let's do that.
The Peter's story. So the three people presenting this are not people, companies presenting this are Columbia Pictures in association with Marvel and Avi Arad, Lord Miller, Pascal Pictures Production. So the Columbia Pictures, you know, they also produced it. They've done other stuff. The other two the third one is the one that I want to touch on the most.
Pascal Pictures.
Well, no, the third screen. So Avi Arad, Lord Miller.
Oh, Avi Arad.
And Pascal Pictures. No, that's fine. So
yeah.
I don't think I'm pronouncing his name right. Avi Arad. He's an Israeli-born executive. He was born in Israel in 1948. And he was the chief creative officer for Marvel Entertainment in the early 2000s. And he was the CEO and founder of Marvel Studios in 2006. So that was when Marvel decided, hey, we want to make our own movies. He was the guy that led that project.
He's the reason we have the MCU, pretty much.
Pretty much, he was the spearheaded that movement in the beginning, and then he left in the early
give that man a cookie.
2010s.
He's the reason we have the MCU. He deserves a cookie.
Yeah.
But no, in all seriousness, that's really cool.
And so he started his own production company that is just like his name as well.
That's awesome.
But
do you know what else they've helped produce, or the production like his new one?
He was heavily involved, or he was pretty involved with the Marvel Comics bankruptcy in '96, and he kind of came through, and he was the co-owner of Toy Biz, which had some licensing deals with Marvel Comics, and so he kind of came out on top of that, and then went on. So Arad Productions is his production company, and they've done some other films, such as the 2007 film Bratz. Never heard of it.
Like the toy?
Yes, based off of the toys.
The toy where that it was either it freaked you or mom out that
I
their
think it was
feet
Mom.
came off.
Yeah, that probably freaked Mom out.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. It freaked mom out. You commented it on a lot, which I was always like
They were
upset
just
about
weird.
because I loved my brats.
Yeah, they were weird.
I still have
didn't
them,
like the
actually.
proportions.
They're strange proportions. I'll give you that.
They did the. Oh yeah, they helped produce the 2017 adaptation of Ghost in the Shell. They helped adapt. Sorry, did that ever come out? Oh yeah, it did. Okay. They helped adapt Fablehaven and Maximum Ride, and they're currently in adaptation. They're currently working on adaptations of the Uncharted game, Infamous game, and Metal Gear Solid games into adapting those into movies. And there's been a bunch of other movies that he's been either executive producer on or producer on. Since 1993, between TVs and movies. He was helped. He was the executive producer on the X-Men, the Spider-Man 1 from 2002, X2, Spider-Man 2. Like, he's been involved with pretty much all of the Marvel's movies up through The Incredible Hulk, and then he had stepped down from the executive producer, or he had stepped down from working as part of Marvel Studios around the time soon after Incredible Hulk came out, and then he's kind of focused on the Marvel products wise. He's still a producer on the Spider-Man movies, so because he's working with Sony now.
Yeah. Well, makes sense.
Yeah, and then Lord Miller Productions is, Lord Miller. The producers are Phil Lord and Christopher Miller. They worked together mostly. Both were born in 1975 and I believe went to school together. And they directed Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 1.
I love that movie.
Yeah, 21 and 22 Jump Street, and they did the first Lego movie. And then
we love that movie.
Yes. And then they were producers for the second Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs.
That's actually a pretty good sequel.
Yeah, and then the Lego Batman movie and the Lego Movie 2. And they were originally slated to work on the Solo A Star Wars Story, but then as directors, but then they got fired and Ron Howard replaced them. And then Phil Lord was a writer on this movie and co-producer, and Miller just helped produce it.
Okay.
And Pascal Productions we had touched on yesterday.
Yeah.
On Monday.
Little confused there, Sean?
I mean, I forgot it wasn't yesterday. It all blends together.
It's fine.
On last time.
Previously. How about we start talking a little bit more about the minute now that we covered the productions and stuff. I mean, it has, but I mean a little bit more about like what's in the minute instead of.
I mean, that is covered on Peter's introduction.
Yes. So we covered the comic style credits. We talked about the music, which honestly could be a whole episode on its own. And then I brought up, but then we went back to the music, was Chris Pine voices this Spider-Man, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
This is Chris Pine of Star Trek, the Star Trek reboot, and Wonder Woman fame.
I remember, first off, great choice to do a quick Spider-Man cameo. I don't know why. I love the idea of him playing like an older Spider-Man. Even though the Spider-Man isn't exactly older, I love the idea of him being Spider-Man. I think
he's in his
has that
30s, I believe. It'll come up. It comes up in a later minute. We get a more exact age.
Yeah. Yeah. But he's in his 20s, I think, in this.
I mean, it'll come up in a later minute. We'll get a more exact age.
But I love the idea of Chris Pine playing Spider-Man. I think he has that quirkiness and that goofiness, but like it would be an older Spider-Man if they ever did it live action. So, and I remember seeing online someone pointed it out. It's like Marvel has Chris Hemsworth, Marvel has Chris Pratt, Marvel has who plays Captain America? Chris
Evans.
Chris Evans, and now they have Chris Pine. You really think they weren't going to get another Chris? They're going to summon all the Chris's and start a battle. And I'm like, this is the funniest thing I've ever seen. But it's also true. Marvel now has all of the Chris's. And they already have all of the Toms. So it's genius. But it's a very short sequence. But I think he just kills the sequence voice acting wise.
Yeah, his voice is always, it's deeper than what I would expect a Peter Parker's voice to be, but it does make a little bit of sense.
That's why I think he makes a nice
off at first. Yeah,
it makes a nice older Spider-Man. So I don't know, I think it shows if in like for Spider-Man PS4 when that game came out, that's sort of like maybe a little older than that Peter / Spider-Man. That's sort of the age I expect Chris Pine to play. I think his voice fits that very well.
Yeah. The first thing I noticed was that this Peter's blonde.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's a very quick flash of his face. Did you notice that? This whole sequence, we only see his face like once.
Yeah. We get a younger shot of him with Uncle Ben talking to him, where you can clearly see that he's blonde in that shot. But this is very reminiscent of the Peter's clone from the Clone Saga in the 90s, whose name is Ben Reilly, and he had blonde hair instead of the typical brown hair that Peter's.
I wonder if that was done on purpose, like as
Probably.
a specific reference to that, or if they're just like, nah, let's just make him blonde and then we'll make a joke about it later.
They did mention that this Peter Parker and Spider-Man are supposed to be sort of an amalgamation of the ones that we know. He's sort of all the cool parts of the different Spider people smashed together.
Makes sense since it's supposed to be of all of the Spider-Men, to bring this up since we talked about it in a previous episode, be a Spider-Man 3 jab.
Yeah, the dancing
this
scene.
happened. The dance scene made me laugh so hard. I find it funnier that he's in the actual Spider-Man suit doing the dance.
Yeah.
Did you find it funnier in the actual suit?
I find that I think what made it even better is I went back and checked that scene, and it is it's the same exact music, it's the same exact moves that he's doing, they matched the scene perfectly. And I think
they really did just do it kind of almost shot for shot.
We've been here before.
Yeah, that's why I loved it so much. It's like they really did just that perfectly, which I think makes it so much better. And then the fact that it's like, we don't talk about this, just makes me laugh every time I see it.
Yeah.
It's one of my personal favorite jokes. We haven't gotten to my favorite joke in the whole movie, but we will. And I'm excited to get to that one.
They pull a couple of the different heroics he does from the Sam Raimi Spider-Man, such as the train that he catches is this pulled from
train.
The train sequence is pulled from Spider-Man 2 in 2004. The upside down kiss is done in the original, in the
Which I found very
2002
funny that
Spider-Man.
they had
MJ
they
and
had
Peter
MJ upside
reversed.
down.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
I
swapped
found
the
that
roles
very
there.
amusing.
Um, and the dancing thing. The one thing
The
that
dance.
I'm not sure if it was supposed to be a direct pull from it, but when he's holding the buses on
That made me
the
think of
bridge.
Homecoming.
Yeah, it reminded me of the ferry scene where he was trying to hold the ferries
Yeah.
together, because there's a very similar shot where Peter's got his arms stretched out, or yeah, Peter's got his arms stretched out like that, and does a very similar thing trying to hold two things together from falling apart.
Yeah. That was interesting. It almost felt like, because in one of the first Spider-Man movies, didn't he catch like a bus off of like the bridge and was like holding on and helping like having a kid?
Yeah, I forget which one that was, but there is a scene where he does something, but with just a single bus.
Yeah, so I wonder if it was like a combination of the homecoming scene and that. It's like, here's two. Because why not?
For the dance scene, real quick.
Yeah.
For the dance scene, that was actually the Phil Lord pushed back against that joke. He mentioned
Really?
during the commentary track, he mentions how like at first he wasn't sure about that joke. He wasn't really
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
And then eventually like he was won over, and they referred to it as a warm-up laugh to like let the audience know, like to warm them up and let them know like, hey, it's going to be this kind of movie. It's going to be a humorous movie. It's okay
I
to
do
laugh.
remember them talking. I do remember them talking about that in the commentary. Yeah, it's definitely in like my top 10 of the favorite jokes. Maybe top 5, cuz there are some great jokes in
Yeah.
this movie. There are some really good ones.
The other heroic that I forgot to mention. The other heroic is when Peter and MJ are sitting at the diner and the car comes flying through.
Yeah, and he turns around and punches it.
Yeah, it's really similar to the Spider-Man 2 scene where Doc Ock throws an SUV at Spider-Man. But in this one, he's actually able to punch it back, whereas in Spider-Man 2, he just dodges out of the way.
Yeah. It's like, I'm going to punch it back this time.
Yeah. Okay. I just have two more notes on the comic that he introduces in the beginning, and then the Spider-Man products. So, yeah, we'll get to that. Okay, and the one thing that we kind of forgot to mention was the way this story is framed is that it's a True Life Tales of Spider-Man comic book, and we're flipping through pages of like different feats that Spider-Man has done.
I thought so. I was kind of glancing at it a few times, and I'm like, this looks like it's like they didn't just throw things in there. It looks like it's like an actual comic they put together.
Yeah, it's from the comic, the story arc Revenge of the Sinister Six from it was published in the first half of 1992, and in one of the issues he fights Dr. Octopus throughout the story arc, and so it was really interesting. If you look at it, you can actually it's issue 9 of the Tales of Spider-Man, so it took them 8 issues before this to finally get around to be like, wait, who is this person?
Like, we'll just accept this, and they're like 8 issues later, like, how did it become like this?
And then
okay, we'll explain that now.
The really interesting thing, if you look at the price of the comic, it's $1.75, and Marvel Comics in the mid 90s did cost $1.75. So it fits in like line with the interior of the comic. I don't know if that was just a happy accident or if they actually did that on purpose. But March falls within the time frame of when that Revenge of the Sinister Six story arc happened. So they very well could have, been like, hey, this is when this comic, this is a legitimate release for this comic in our universe.
That's. I wouldn't be surprised if they did that on purpose. Like, the details in this movie are insane.
Yeah. But the cover is a made up cover that was drawn by somebody else.
I do enjoy the cover. It's a very nice cover. Well, you're finding the artist, since we talked about like details. One detail that it's not really detail, but it's a nice like flash. There's a few flashes in this that I thoroughly enjoyed, but one of them is that we see 42 twice in this intro.
Yeah. Can we actually come back to that? Because I have some notes on that too, but I found the artist as well.
We can come back to that.
So as the comic's spinning out, I just wanted to verify it. As the comic's rotating out, you see in the bottom right-hand corner and a signature that says M. Vignali, who is the actual artist that did that cover. He worked on the movie. His name's Marcello Vignali, and he did the design for all of the fictional comics in the movie. So like anytime it's not a real comic book bit, he did that cover or the interior design. There'll be a point later in the movie when Miles is looking at a comic, and he does the layout for that, because they're like, well, we can't just stick any old thing in there because it's got to line up with the movie, what's going on in the movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll have to look at that and look at some of the other covers in the
yeah.
upcoming
I'm
minutes.
excited to talk about the covers because, like I said earlier, it's a running theme in this movie to have the comics sort of be like their background abridged, and it's probably one of my favorite themes in the movie.
Yeah.
There's a few flashes that I have that I do want to talk about. We'll come back to the 42, but this kind of ties in with it a bit. At, I guess it would be a minute 7 at this point.
You mean second 7?
Yeah, second 7. There's a flash of the spider that bites Miles and the collider behind it.
Yeah.
We won't go too much into that, but I just thought that was a really cool thing, like a quick flash. So the thing I wanted to talk about first is, first off, first time we see Spider-Man in this whole movie is actually a reflection of him in the mirror, and he's just staring squarely at him in the mirror, mask on and everything. During that like real sequence at around 5 seconds, there's one, maybe 2 frames where there's a flash where his face is shadowed and the background that was originally like clean is graffitied. Did you notice that?
Yeah, I noticed it flashed. I didn't catch the graffiti at first, but now that
I actually went in. I'm like, hold on, let me go through this slowly because there's something flashed there, and I want to see what it flashed. And it's a shadow on the face, and then graffiti in the background. It's almost like he flashes into like a subway bathroom.
Yeah.
But subways don't have bathrooms. So it was very interesting to like. But I wanted to talk about that, like what you thought of that, because I didn't really know what to make of it. Besides, it was a cool flash.
It
feels very intentional.
It almost looks like it's supposed to be like glow in the dark graffiti, or it could be graffiti. It could just be him, at 2 different times, just like, oh, he, looks in the mirror a lot. Just, whenever he goes to the bathroom, he always goes in and looks in, and he's like, "Sup?"
Is that maybe it's foreshadowing a bit? They've already I won't go into too much foreshadowing. We can talk about it when we get to that actual minute. But okay, like I said, this is Miles. We've already said like this is Miles' origin story. Like Miles Morales is Spider-Man, and they've already sort of established with just a few things. Like with the flash of spray paint in the logos and the tag on the Sony Animations thing, they're already starting to tie Miles and graffiti together. So it almost, a way, kind of like, it feels like they're trying to already kind of subtly tie Miles and Spider-Man together. Yeah, like hint, hint, like a little foreshadowing. I just thought of that.
Oh yeah, and maybe because like his suit's starting to turn.
Yeah,
Like,
his
'cause
suit
it's in
has like there's
shadows,
a
it's
shadow.
getting
It's
close
like
to black.
specifically on the face. It's black. Miles has a black suit, and there's another way to take it, which I won't say until we get to that minute because it's a pretty big spoiler if people aren't familiar with Miles's story. But I saw that and I'm like, I wanted to talk about it with you because watching it, I'm like, I wonder what that could be, and it just hit me now because I'm now looking at all of these parallels I have in my notes.
It's also
That may be a bit foreshadowing and trying to tie graffiti and that together pretty early on.
yeah. It's also I just noticed it's two different bathrooms.
It is two different
I
bathrooms.
I
Okay.
hadn't really yeah, because if you look behind him in the graffitied bathroom, there's a mirror back there, and there isn't in the
Okay.
regular one.
I couldn't tell if it was actually two different bathrooms or not.
Yeah. I don't know if it's. Oh yeah, no, it's two different bathrooms.
Okay. But I thought that was it seemed like a very intentional flash. So I'm like, what are they trying to say with this? And like we're gonna say, there's so many references and like with the Spider-Man, with the spider and the collider, like that shows up again later. Like all of these things, like okay, they're not only showing references, but they're also hinting at things that are gonna happen.
Yeah.
So like, and that doesn't feel like any sort of quick reference. That feels like here's a quick flash of a foreshadow or something. But I thought that was really cool. Do you have anything else to say on that?
No, and then that scene cuts into the spider hanging in front of the collider.
Yes. Yeah, that's at 7 seconds.
So the spider in front of the collider
Mm-hmm.
is when the spider gets its like powers, kind of.
Oh, I never even thought of that.
Because we find that spider like close to the collider anyway, and it's hanging right in front of it. There's the earthquake that they talk about happening, the first earthquake. So I bet you that's what it. Okay. Anyway, so so the spider then appears in front of the collider, and it's got the you see two things on it: 42 and Alchemex.
Yes.
Alchemex.
And then it's almost like another flash, or it's another quick thing, and then there's a flash of like the 42 on an almost like a bingo ball, right? Or is that before that?
That's the next scene.
Okay,
that's a full scene. So yeah, the spider drops down. It's got that Alchemex written on it, which is the, mega corporation.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I have to say about Alchemex.
Um,
So the 42.
42.
Yeah, so the 42 appears on it, and then in the next scene, they're actually lottery balls. I guess bingo balls.
That's what I was.
Yeah.
I meant lottery balls. That's what I was thinking, and then I said bingo balls. I don't know why. I knew what I thought. I just said the wrong word.
Yeah, so the 42 appears on the lottery balls, and we'll see this number keep cropping up a lot in association with Miles, and the lottery balls is kind of specifically. There's two things you can kind of associate with it: is the lottery of him getting like picked to be Spider-Man by the spider, if you want to think about it that much, but also like he also won a lottery to get into the
get into the
school that he goes to.
I didn't even make that connection.
There's a lot of this sort of association with like chance and does he deserve it, because it kind of things on it,
or almost like this expectation put on him because he got these things where I talked in a previous episode about how a kid in my speech class didn't feel represented until Miles came around. Well, in that same speech class, someone who is a huge Spider-Man fan and a Spider-Verse fan, so much so that he got a Spider-Verse tattoo on his wrist. It says "Thwip." which makes me really happy. I'm like, that's the best tattoo ever. He did a speech on diversity in comics, and he talked about Miles. And one thing I thought that was a very interesting point he brought up is how with Peter Parker, it talks about responsibility. But with Miles, a common theme, especially in Spider-Verse, is expectations. Like, you are put in these things, this is what is expected of you.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, I just wanted to bring that up. Because I thought it was something really interesting to think on. Isn't this... Okay, this is going back to 42.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't this also take place in Universe 42? Or did I make that up?
Think you might have made that up.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I know in a later on in the movie we see different universe numbers appear. I don't know if they actually number this universe or not. I mean, we might as well call it Earth 42.
Yeah, well, and I also always think of, like, what's the answer to the universe? 42.
Yeah, this one, though, they focus more on it being Jackie Robinson's number.
Oh, okay.
Who's also 42 and is also from Brooklyn, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were saying, like, oh, it's actually, like, kind of more related to that than the, answer to life, the universe, and everything else, 42.
To pull up another Jackie Robinson parallel besides him being from Brooklyn is that he's the first African-American to play in the Major League Baseball in the modern era. Very similar to how Miles was, like, really one of the first people of color to take over a already established character.
Yeah, he was the first one to take over a legacy character.
Yeah, so in many ways he is like a Jackie Robinson for Marvel.
Yeah.
Type thing. So that actually brings up a different parallel, I think. She's like, wasn't Jackie Robinson like first person of color but first African American? And so that's also another parallel with 42. Whether they intended that or not, I think it's interesting to bring that up as well.
Mm-hmm. So the Spider-Man products.
Yes, the
okay. So
the Spider-Man products.
The last thing at the end of the minute is the different things that Spider-Man has.
I'm a comic. I'm a cereal. I had a
TV
Christmas album.
Oh yeah, Christmas album.
A TV
show.
And then it goes to the TV show, but it cuts off right before that.
Yeah, and so the cereal, if you look at the way the like box is formed, it very much looks like a parody of Wheaties, and how they would always put on, famous people on the cover of Wheaties, and that was always a big deal. And then the comic here is actually, it's a real comic cover but titled differently. So it's another of the true life tales of Spider-Man, whereas the real comic is from Amazing Spider-Man.
Okay.
But it is the story is called Chaos is the Chameleon, which was Spider-Man number 186. But you still see, like, it still has the chameleon located on the cover, and it's got the same cover art there. So it was an in-universe event that became fictionalized as part of the comic, which... And
again, someone's writing these comics in this universe about their actual friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Yeah, I really like that. Marvel has kind of run with that theme, even like in their regular comics, is there are, Spider-Man comics and Fantastic Four comics in universe.
I love that so much. I do think my favorite products joke is the Christmas album.
Yeah, that one's really funny. And
that might be because you've played me the song from the Christmas album that he like sings partially in the movie.
Yeah.
And that in its own right is comedic genius. I also just love the idea of Spider-Man having a Christmas album. Correct. Really, this whole sequence is just funnier when you realize that he's always in the suit.
Yeah.
Like, he's in the bathroom. Like, okay, so normal things. Obviously, fighting crime in the suit. But then he does the Spider-Man 3 dance in the suit, which makes it funnier. But then there's, like, goofier things. Like, he goes on a date with MJ in the suit. He is on the Christmas album. Again, makes sense. In the suit. But then to, like, if he's going on a date with MJ in the suit, to, like, people not... She's like, wait, I thought you were dating Peter Parker. Why are you on a date with Spider-Man? Like, I would love to hear the cover-up they make for that. It's like, oh, we were on a business dinner, or, Peter and I are taking a break, so I'm seeing Spider-Man.
It could also just be in universe that everyone knows that Peter is Spider-Man. I know at one point...
No, they don't. They don't, because it's revealed later. Remember?
Do they reveal it, or do they just talk about it?
No, I believe they reveal it. Like in the news, because I remember when they bring it up. Yeah, okay, like people are shocked, and like even MJ is like, my husband. Like, it's definitely implied that, and even like Peter says himself at one point, like, oh, that's not good when his mask is taken off.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Okay.
So it's still, so in universe, he still seems to be in secret.
Yeah, the reason I thought he might have uncovered was because in the Ultimate storyline the Ultimates universe in the comics.
Did he pull an Iron Man?
He, during the Civil War storyline, he unveils himself to, like, register as, to become, like, a registered superhero. So I was wondering if they did something similar to that.
You have to register as a superhero?
It was a whole thing. Part of that storyline was they wanted to register the superheroes or the people with powers because some people with powers did some bad stuff.
Okay. That sounds funny. We're gonna register you with powers. Like, it's like, okay. It's like, I'd like to become a superhero. Okay, you gotta go register. Do you have your permit?
Or something very similar to that, where, like, you could get arrested if you were using your powers without being registered.
That's hilarious. To me. I just have else in here, like, amazing references. I genuinely loved the references they made in here.
Yeah.
That's about all I have for this minute, notes-wise. Do you have anything else?
No, that's all I have as well. Okay.
Let's leave this episode here. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And when's the next time we upload? Friday. We'll hear from you Friday. I guess you'll hear from us Friday for our next episode on minute 3.
Thank you. Bye.
See you later.